I always thought working for Disney would be a dream come true. That's what everyone says, right? The happiest place on earth, the magic of childhood, the chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. When I landed an internship at their Burbank studio, I felt like I'd won the lottery. I was 21, fresh out of art school and ready to prove myself. I didn't care that I'd be running errands and fetching coffee for the real animators. I just wanted to be close to the magic. The first few weeks were everything I'd hoped for. The studio was a maze of creativity, sketches pinned to every wall, animators hunched over their desks, the air buzzing with ideas. I spent my days delivering storyboards, organizing reference books, and soaking up every bit of knowledge I could. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of something special, a rough cut of a new feature, a character design that hadn't been announced yet. It felt like I was peeking behind the curtain of my own childhood. But there was one part of the studio I was told to avoid: the old animation vault in the basement. It was a relic from the early days. A windowless room lined with metal shelves and battered film canisters. That's where we keep the stuff that never made it to the screen, my supervisor joked one day, handing me a stack of model sheets, failed pilots, abandoned projects, test reels, nothing you'd want to see. He said it with a smile, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease, quickly hidden. Of course, that only made me more curious. I started asking around, but no one wanted to talk about the vault. Some of the older animators would just shake their heads and change the subject. Others would mutter about bad luck or unfinished business. I figured it was just studio superstition, the kind of stories people tell to scare the new kid. But the more I heard, the more I wanted to know. One afternoon I was sent to the basement to retrieve some old backgrounds for a restoration project. The storage room was right next to the vault. As I was digging through boxes, I noticed the vault door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, glancing over my shoulder, but the hallway was empty. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of old film. Rows of shelves stretched into the darkness, each one packed with reels and boxes labeled in faded marker. I wandered down the aisle, running my fingers over the spines, reading the names of forgotten projects. Most were just numbers or working titles, but one box caught my eye. It was smaller than the others, wrapped in brown paper, and marked with a single word: test. I picked up the box, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It was heavier than I expected, and the paper was brittle, crumbling a little at the corners. There was no date, no project name, just that one word, test, scrawled in black ink. I glanced around, half expecting someone to appear and tell me to put it back, but the vault was silent. The only sound was the hum of the old fluorescent lights overhead. Curiosity got the better of me. I tucked the box under my arm and slipped out of the vault, closing the door behind me. Back in the storage room, I set the box on a table and carefully peeled away the paper. Inside was a single film reel, smaller than the others I'd seen, and a yellowed envelope. My hands shook a little as I opened the envelope. Inside was a note, written in neat, looping handwriting. For internal review only. Do not screen for public or staff. Destroy after viewing. My heart thudded in my chest. I knew I should have put the reel back, but I couldn't resist. I'd seen enough behind-the-scenes documentaries to know that Disney's archives were full of strange experiments, animation tests, storyboards, even entire films that never saw the light of day. Maybe this was some lost gem, a piece of history no one else had seen. I waited until the end of my shift, when the studio was quiet and most of the staff had gone home. I found an old projector in one of the editing rooms, threaded the reel, and turned off the lights. The film sputtered to life, casting flickering shadows on the wall. At first, it was just a test pattern, the kind you see at the start of old movies. Then the screen went black. A title card appeared, white letters on a dark background. Character animation test, 1955. The film cut to a simple scene. A little girl, drawn in the classic Disney style, standing in a field of tall grass. She wore a blue dress and had wide, innocent eyes. The animation was rough, unfinished, but there was something captivating about it. The girl looked around, her movements fluid and lifelike. She smiled, picked a flower, and twirled in the sunlight. But as the test continued, something changed. The colors grew darker, the sky turning from blue to a sickly green. The girl's smile faded. She looked off-screen, her eyes widening in fear. The grass around her began to wither, turning brown and brittle. A shadow crept across the field, swallowing the sunlight. The girl backed away, her movements jerky now, almost desperate. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass of the projector booth. The film was silent, but I could almost hear the wind howling, the grass rustling. The girl stumbled, fell, and looked straight at the camera. Her eyes were huge, pleading. The screen flickered, and for a split second, her face twisted into something else, something raw. I blinked, unsure if I'd really seen it. The frame had glitched, just for a moment, but the image lingered in my mind. The girl's mouth stretched too wide, her eyes black and empty, her skin a waxy, unnatural gray. Then just as quickly, she was back to normal, sitting in the grass, hugging her knees to her chest. The field around her was dead now, the sky a swirling mass of dark clouds. The animation grew rougher, the lines shakier, as if the artist's hand had started to tremble. The girl began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked up at the sky, her lips moving as if she were whispering something, but there was no sound. The camera panned out, and I saw that she was no longer alone. Figures stood at the edge of the field, tall, thin shadows with elongated limbs and featureless faces. They didn't move, didn't speak. They just watched. The girl stood, her body shaking, and took a hesitant step toward the shadows. The film flickered again, and for a heartbeat, the shadows seemed to pulse, their forms rippling like smoke. The girl stopped, turned, and ran in the opposite direction, but the field stretched on forever. No matter how fast she moved, she never got any closer to the edge. The shadows began to advance, gliding across the dead grass, their arms outstretched. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. This wasn't like any Disney animation I'd ever seen. There was no music, no dialogue, just the relentless silence and the sense of something terrible closing in. The girl tripped as and fell again, her dress torn, her knees scraped. She looked back at the shadows, her face twisted in terror. The film glitched once more, and for a split second, the screen was filled with static. When the image returned, the girl was gone. The field was empty, the grass flattened as if something heavy had passed through. The shadows lingered at the edge of the frame, then melted away, leaving only the swirling sky. The camera panned down to the spot where the girl had fallen. There, in the dirt, was a single, perfect daisy, its petals stark white against the blackened earth. The film ended abruptly, the screen going black. I sat in the darkness, heart racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. It didn't make sense. Why would Disney animate something like this? Why hide it away in the vault, with instructions to destroy it? I rewound the reel, half expecting the images to change, to reveal some hidden message. But it played the same way, every time. The girl, the shadows, the daisy. I sat there for a long time, the whir of the projector still echoing in my ears. The room felt colder, the shadows in the corners deeper than before. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was just an old test, a failed experiment from a different era. But the images wouldn't leave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the girl's face, her silent scream, the way the shadows seemed to reach for her. I wondered if anyone else had ever watched this reel, if any of the animators who worked on it were still alive to explain what I'd seen. I put the film back in its box, wrapped it in the brittle brown paper, and slid it onto the shelf where I'd found it. I told myself I'd forget about it, that I'd never go near the vault again. But that night, I dreamed of the field. I was standing in the dead grass, the sky swirling overhead, the shadows watching from the edge. The girl was there too, her dress torn, her eyes bleeding. She reached out to me, her hand cold and weightless, and whispered something I couldn't understand. When I woke up, my heart was pounding, and my sheets were tangled around me like vines. The next day at the studio, I tried to act normal. I went about my tasks, delivered storyboards, fetched coffee, smiled at the animators. But I couldn't stop thinking about the test reel. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Old sketches pinned to the walls, half-finished drawings of the same little girl, always alone, always afraid. I overheard two animators talking in hushed voices about the Vault Project, their faces pale and tense. When they saw me listening, they fell silent and walked away. I decided to do some digging. After my shift, I went to the library and searched through old animation journals, studio newsletters, anything I could find about Disney's projects from the 1950s. There was no mention of a test like the one I'd seen, no record of a film featuring a little girl in a field, no notes about abandoned projects with shadowy figures. It was as if the reel had never existed. But I did find one thing, a faded photograph in an old issue of Animation Weekly. It showed a group of animators standing in front of the Burbank studio, smiling for the camera. In the back row was a man I recognized from the credits of classic Disney films. He was holding a sketchbook, open to a drawing of the little girl from the test reel. The caption read, "New Character Study, 1955, Project Never Completed." That night the dreams came back, stronger than before. The girl's voice was clearer now, her words urgent, desperate. "Don't let them forget me," she whispered, over and over as the shadows closed in. I started to dread going to sleep. Every night the dream picked up where it left off. The field, the swirling sky, the girl reaching for me. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping, convinced I could still feel her cold hand in mine. Other times, I'd hear her voice echoing in the silence of my room, pleading with me to remember, to help her. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my work, but the line between dream and reality was starting to blur. At the studio, I became obsessed with the vault. I'd find excuses to go down there, always glancing at the shelf where I'd left the box. I never took it out again, but I'd run my fingers over the brittle paper, feeling the weight of the secret I was keeping. I started asking more questions, but people grew wary, their answers clipped and guarded. One of the older animators, a woman named Ruth, finally pulled me aside. "Some things are better left alone," she said quietly, her eyes haunted. "That project, it was supposed to be a test, just a test, but it went wrong. People got hurt. They said it was just bad luck, but I never believed that." I pressed her for details, but she shook her head. "Let it go," she whispered, "for your own sake." But I couldn't. I spent hours in the library, poring over old records, trying to piece together what had happened. I found references to a psychological animation study conducted in the mid-1950s, a project designed to test the emotional impact of certain images on children. The notes were vague, the results never published. The project was quietly shut down, the footage locked away. The more I learned, the more I realized the test reel wasn't just an experiment in animation. It was something darker, something meant to probe the boundaries of fear and memory. I wondered how many people had seen it, how many had been haunted by the same dreams. I wondered if the girl in the film was based on someone real, or if she was just a creation of the animator's collective imagination, a vessel for something they didn't understand. One evening, as I was leaving the studio, I saw Ruth standing by the gate, staring up at the sky. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "You saw her, didn't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak. She sighed, her breath visible in the cool night air. "She never leaves you, not really. You can try to forget, but she always finds a way back." That night I dreamed of the field again. This time the girl stood at the edge, her back to me, the shadows swirling around her. She turned, her eyes full of sorrow, and held out the daisy. "Remember me," she said, and I woke up with tears on my face. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. The dreams, the guilt, the feeling that I was carrying someone else's memory, it was all too much. I started writing everything down, every detail I could remember from the test reel, every word the girl had whispered in my dreams. I filled pages with sketches of the field, the shadows, the daisy, and the girl's pleading eyes. I didn't know what I hoped to accomplish. Maybe I thought that if I put it all on paper, it would lose its power over me. Maybe I just wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. One afternoon I gathered my courage and went back to the vault one last time. The box was still there, untouched, the brown paper even more fragile than before. I took it out and carried it to the editing room, my hands shaking. I threaded the reel onto the projector, but this time I didn't watch it alone. I invited Ruth to join me. She hesitated at first, but finally agreed, her face pale and drawn. We sat in silence as the film played. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, saw the way her hands clenched in her lap, the way her breath caught when the girl looked at the camera. When the film ended, Ruth wiped her eyes and turned to me. "It's worse than I remember," she whispered. "We thought we were just making a test, but it became something else, something that wanted to be remembered." I asked her what happened to the animators who worked on the project. She shook her head. Some left the studio. Some didn't make it. They said it was just coincidence, but after a while, no one wanted to talk about it. We locked it away and tried to forget. She looked at me, her eyes full of regret. But you can't forget, can you? She won't let you. We decided to do what the note in the envelope had said. Together we took the reel out to the studio's old incinerator. We stood in silence as the flames consumed the film, the box, and the envelope. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, as if I was saying goodbye to someone I'd known my whole life. Ruth squeezed my shoulder. "Maybe now she can rest," she said softly. That night, I slept without dreaming for the first time in weeks. The next morning, the studio felt lighter, the shadows less oppressive. I finished my internship and moved on, but I never forgot what happened in that basement vault. Sometimes when I see a field of wildflowers or a little girl in a blue dress, I feel a pang of sorrow, a reminder of the story that was never meant to be told. If you ever find yourself in an old animation studio and someone tells you not to go into the vault, listen to them. Some stories are locked away for a reason. Some memories are too heavy to carry alone. And some characters, once drawn, never really disappear. They just wait in the shadows, hoping someone will remember them.